Eric, I love me a purist, and that is why we have my business partner, Benjamin Franklin Esgro, my partner when it comes to Elemental Formulations, our new supplement company. And I mention these things not only to, of course, promote it. I mean, let's be honest here, that's the case. But do you remember, Eric, at the end, this man goes in on stimulants. If you think you know about supplements, you're going to learn something today. When it even comes to the decision-making that happens as a formulator, but also the considerations, drug classification, so many, like Ben goes in on the science. And at the very end, he delivers, he's like, it's a Sermon on the Mount, right? Delivering this epic speech where I'm pretty sure in the fitness space, they're few and far between, especially when we talk about this in-depth a conversation on stimulants. And I asked my man, Ben, my business partner, hey man, where can people find you? And what does he do, Eric?
He didn't give you what you wanted, I can tell you that much, but I'll let you tell it.
So it's only natural. Hey, Eric, you're on only 1 million podcasts throughout the year. And of course, we're not just about trying to promote ourselves, but we're aware that the work that we do is related to what we're talking about. So Eric is a bodybuilding coach. He's someone highly experienced in the field. He's a scientist. So of course, hey, where can people find you? 3DMJ, because you want to get coaching from me. I just spoke about coaching elements. You could get the real thing by getting our coaching. Oh, you want to get educated on nutrition and getting stronger. I just so happen to have some pyramids that, yes, I financially benefit from this because we are capitalists at our heart, but it genuinely is good. I believe in the high utility of this product. So it's a win. It's a winner-winner chicken dinner. My man, Ben, he speaks on supplements for 2 hours. And I asked him basically just to shout out Elemental Formulations, because that is the neat synthesis of everything that he's talking about, the offerings that then come from the science background he's talking about. And instead he's like, yeah, I guess you could find me at, I mean, I don't really use social media, Ben Esgro. He's like, he just shouts out his personal IG that has nothing on there.
His private IG, by the way, I believe. It's the best part. Yeah, let's just say this. Ben Esgro, the man contains multitudes.
Yep.
He could go from coaching you at USAPL Nationals and telling you to deadlift the plates off of his dying grandmother to get you motivated. Yeah, that's exactly what he told one of our former guests. To then he can go to formulating groundbreaking supplements like Utopia. But one thing that is not among those multitudes is a good salesman. And that's why he needs you in his corner, Omar. And I'm just glad you two found each other.
Man, so self-promotion is not part of it. And I think there is a beauty and a purity like that where, hey, you're just thinking about the formulations. But it's like, if you have great art, in my opinion, you want it to be shared, right? You want it to be something that people could participate in, that they could then experience what you have to offer, rather than basically giving a monologue to a dead audience, like an empty audience, like an empty auditorium. So I just feel like we have another episode coming out with, guess what? Someone, Ryan Doris, spoiler alert here, but he said that off air, where he's like, you just want Ben to succeed because it's like, you're doing a lot of good shit, man. And so I'm kind of that booster. I'm that person. Well, I'm here to boost it up because I know when someone's doing something right, and I know when it should be exposed to more people. So no, man, it's a thrilling episode where, like we said, he talks about anything and everything. He goes deep when it comes to supplements, but he even talks about what is a stimulant. Well, what is the classification of stimulants? How do we come to that conclusion? What are the most powerful stimulants? What are the classifications when it comes to the governing bodies, as an example, what you can and can't use? Why is that so? Why should that not be the case potentially? Right, like so many different things.
No, I think you summed it up really well. To be super corny, this is a very stimulating episode that Ben's going to bring. Thank you. I appreciate that, Omar. Thank you for letting me be me. And with that, we're going to let Ben be Ben, and he's going to give you the true deep dive on everything and anything stimulants.
Eric, can we get ahead of the controversy one more time?
Which one?
There are several. I'm going to probably feature the most prominent one, and that is nepotism in iron culture. That, sure, in today's episode, we have none other than Benjamin Franklin Esgro, okay? My brother in arms. Who, yes, so he's my business partner.
You're pitching something as a bug that I think is a feature, but I'm going to let you continue.
Okay. Yep. No. Yeah. So some would say, yes, it's a conflict of interest because we're here to not promote our businesses because we have our critiques of capitalism. In theory, Benjamin Franklin Esgro, besides being my brother in arms, is my business partner in Elemental Formulations, chief formulator for Elemental Formulations, has a master's in chemistry, a degree in pharmacology, master's in sports nutrition. Seems perfect for this episode. And yes, we can mention our company one more time, Elemental Formulations, that's leading the charge that Eric is on the scientific advisory board, third-party potency, impurity testing. We do all those things. Yes, this is true. But they say we can't have him on because there's that business conflict of interest. So you're on the scientific advisory board, so it's kind of adjacent, but still like that whole nepotism's happening. Can you just tell the haters what's up before we continue? Because we're talking stimulation today, so stimulate them.
Well, a couple things I want to point out is that the way you rattled that off so quickly, I was impressed.
Yeah.
But I think B, some people might have heard a third master's degree that Ben had, and I think some people might have heard that I'm the actual person who does the purity testing. So as an unpaid member of the scientific advisory board, I just want to, for the record, state that I will not be doing any purity testing. But another way to look at conflict of interest is to say, hey, conflict is interesting, you know? So I think we just flip the script a little bit and think about how do we get a podcast that really, we need to ruffle some feathers.
Yeah.
We need to hack some hackles.
Yeah.
We need to, take some pots, get something to stir them with, stir said pots.
Yep.
Or we're just not going to stay relevant in this conflict and controversy driven field.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to get my hair all puffy and just start screaming at the camera about random things in a kind of an annoying high voice if I want to compete with the other, content producers out there these days.
Shock jocks.
So,
yeah. I mean, Ben, do you have anything to say?
So I don't think anything wrong with that.
Okay.
Yeah, he just flipped it. He flipped it from conflict of interest to interesting conflict.
Yeah.
How can I not appreciate that?
Little subtle wordplay right there. And Ben, that was the easier, conflict of interest, the controversy for me to personally address, because there's the other one that apparently, Eric, the DEA is after us because there is a rumor that Breaking Bad is in fact a true story and that Ben has an uncanny similarity to the lead character of Breaking Bad, and we are using the funds from Elemental Formulations to, fund a vast criminal organization that's here to basically take over the world. And that's, of course, that sounds outlandish. Like that, how nonsensical does that sound? Like there's a show that apparently is actually based in reality, and Ben has some of the same qualifications as the lead character, and he's uttered some statements that if you match the timeline seem to eerily match up with the timeline of the show before it came out. That's a ludicrous one. So I just whoosh.
Yeah, I see Anonymous Giraffe has just joined our Skype call, so it's like the Google Sheets.
Let's just put it this way. Omar, you do not remind me of Jesse at all.
Thank
so if that is actually a documentary, I think first they whitewashed your role first, which I'm sick and tired of in Hollywood.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah. Second, really downplayed your level of intelligence and contribution to the company. Which I guess they eventually show that lack of appreciation caused some conflict.
Sure.
And, eventually, it worked out for Jesse. So let's just hope in real life that doesn't get replicated. So Ben, I just want you to always appreciate Omar. Second, I would say it is a little odd. We were talking off camera, Ben, and you'd mentioned that you'd been bouncing around constantly between Florida, Pennsylvania, and France out of the country. And somehow doing that in the midst of COVID. And not to mention that I believe you've actually shifted names of your company recently. So, I mean, how many different shell companies has your supplement company, quote unquote, been named? I mean, at this point, there's been change of ownership for De Novo. De Novo's not around. Now we got Elemental Formulations. Actually, you know what? I've now convinced myself that I think it is true. and I'm actually quite concerned. All right.
I'll say, Eric, the only thing is, that was a mischaracterization, that in fact the accusations have been that I am Gustavo Fring. So it hasn't been in fact a whitewashing so much as the melanin being on point. The only thing that I am dismissive about when it comes to the show is just the fact that they made me a little bit older than I am. I'm 53 and he looks about like 50 to 65. So that's like, I didn't appreciate that, bro.
Actually, it's almost worse because while you do have an ambiguous ethnicity, Omar, I think people know that you don't share the same ethnicity as Gustavo Fring. So it's almost Hollywood just going, you know what?
Yep, doesn't matter.
Any brownish color, we're good. Same thing,
Yeah.
So again, for a different reason, shame on you, Hollywood. Shame. So, but you know what? Despite the fact that Ben is actually the formulation expert for a multinational criminal enterprise, I can think of no one better to talk to about stimulants. How's that for a segue?
Yeah.
I think it's perfect.
Well,
awesome.
Eric, I'll say very quickly, I think we accomplished because we like guests. They say, once again, nepotism. I personally prefer guests that come prepared and have a topic they could thoroughly cover. And Ben was gracious enough to give us an outline. And if you take a look at his outline for today's topic, it literally says at the start, intros. So I'm just going by Ben's outline. I think we did it, right, Eric?
It's on there.
If people did not gather that I'm a literal person, I mean, that should be the icing on the cake.
Bro, I got you. So I was like, all right.
The best part is that he put that on there for us.
That's
you know,
what I'm saying.
like, oh shit, he's keeping us on point, folks. Because if anyone has listened to Iron Culture, you know that the first 30 minutes is pretty much just you roll the dice. You don't know what's going to happen. Yep. So yeah,
that's an intro.
Yeah, Ben, can you please introduce yourself to Iron Culture, even though you've been on multiple times?
I honestly, I don't think I could do a better job than has already been done. So.
Awesome. We'll tick that off. Next question. What is a stimulant? No, I'm just kidding. No, in all seriousness, it's an honor to have you back on, Ben. And I think it's it's the right time in terms of the progression of the supplement industry to talk about stimulants. Because while I think there was a time when it was essentially just caffeine and really nothing else was there, the game now is like, what are the different things we can make you feel in your pre-workout? And there's a whole class of supplements, nootropics and things that are all based around stimulation. And I think despite the fact that is this kind of panacea that has opened up in the supplement industry, and every pre-workout is taking a different approach. And we've even had scandals and legal issues around some of these pre-workouts over the last decade. Most people don't really actually know what a stimulant is, what classifies it as such, and the types of effects it has. So let's actually answer that question of what is a stimulant?
Yeah, so in the most general sense, it's anything that basically causes a neuron to fire. So causes a neuron to release an action potential. I think actually the most general way people describe stimulants as uppers is probably super appropriate. Like there's uppers and downers. So basically the difference is an upper is going to activate the sympathetic nervous system. A downer is going to cause or reduce the probability that a neuron will fire. And then to get a little more specific, basically it's going to cause a release of stimulatory neurotransmitters. So those are acetylcholine, dopamine, nor or epinephrine, glutamate, and histamine. And there's a little asterisk there because I feel like leaving off caffeine would be upsetting to people, because people say, oh, well, how does caffeine not fit in there? I think the interesting aspect to caffeine is that it's actually an adenosine receptor antagonist. So yeah, there's actually a bit of I think listening to the prior episode would probably be helpful for people, because we covered that like in depth. But the interesting aspect of caffeine is that its main mechanism is adenosine receptor antagonist, which partly accounts for the stimulation you feel, but it's actually also a PDE inhibitor, which is phosphodiesterase. And the role of that is actually to prevent the degradation of CAMP. So basically, if no one's heard of CAMP before, it's called an intracellular second messenger. So if something binds with like a compound binds to some type of receptor on the outside of the cell membrane, it can cause release inside CAMP, and CAMP will actually be released inside the cell and cause the message to be propagated. So it's almost like if you were locked out of a room and someone was in that room and you wanted them to turn something on, if you gave them a phone call, told them to turn it on, like the phone call is that second messenger. So basically what CAMP does is it will cause a release of epinephrine. So it's indirect, but caffeine has a couple different roles beyond just the adenosine receptor antagonism.
It's interesting.
So it is still a stimulant.
Yep. I think it's interesting that the most popular, well-known, and most consumed stimulant is actually a stimulant like downstream of its primary effect. I think that's something that's a little interesting to me. So let me ask you a question there, Ben. What you chewing?
It's actually old. Nicorette's the brand name in America, but this is from when I was in Sweden for Worlds. Last time Worlds happened.
For the record, that's a fourth location that Ben has been traveling around the world. But let's just let that slide.
So it's I don't know what the brand name is, but it's European Nicorette.
Got it.
So way past expiration.
A random country that doesn't extradite back to the United States.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Safe haven Nicorette.
So how does while we're on the topic, how does nicotine fit into the whole stimulant conversation?
Similar to caffeine, where there'll be like an indirect release, but nicotine, there's that part, and then nicotine actually acts directly on acetylcholine receptors, so cholinergic receptors. So that's why there's subclasses of all these receptors. So there's muscarinic acetylcholine receptors, or muscarinic cholinergic, and then there's nicotinic cholinergic. So there's a whole sub branch of cholinergic receptors that just have a site for nicotine. So it will activate that, and since acetylcholine is one of the primary stimulatory neurotransmitters, that will also cause those neurons to fire, and you'll get stimulation from it.
Okay, gotcha. So I know I interrupted us talking about gum. So was there more you wanted to say on what exactly classes something as a stimulant, or do you think we covered those bases there?
No, I think that's good, and that's a great point. I forgot about nicotine as well. I'm so lost in caffeine as being the dietary supplement version, like you said, is what everybody's used to as the supplement version of a stimulant. Although nicotine's technically not and can't be a supplement, that is a very interesting one as well.
Mm-hmm. And is that because nicotine is not found in the food supply?
So, okay, we'll get into this at some point, but nicotine technically should be able to be a dietary supplement, because under DSHEA regulation, which is Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, when they basically rewrote the law for what classifies as a supplement, it has to be, one of the things is it has to be botanical in nature, and typically nicotine is found in tobacco leaf. That's yep. Botanical. So for whatever reason, I actually don't know the reason why it got lumped into alcohol, tobacco, firearms, but technically it should be able to be a dietary supplement.
Is that just because it was classed as a controlled substance at some point? I mean, that's I guess because you make the same argument for like cocaine or marijuana.
So typically what happens, so there are other botanical stimulants like ephedra or ephedrine, which is, again, from a plant. It's, it grows normally, you could harvest it. Same thing with, if people have heard of bath salts, that's actually a plant called Catha edulis. It grows in Ethiopia, and that produces cathinones. Those are also highly stimulatory. The common name is khat, or cat, Khat. That would normally be able to be a dietary supplement, but because it got banned by the FDA, it can't be. So that's sort of like that weird middle ground. And it's hard for me to not think that money has something to do with it. Obviously, that tobacco companies are so big that they can almost make their own subcategory to stand out and not be able to be competed with by supplement companies. It is also highly toxic too.
Oh, that safety thing. I've always thought that the pharmaceutical industry and the supplement industry were a few of the last bastions of people just doing it for the love, that money wasn't much of an influence. So I think we're learning something every time we bring you on, Ben.
That's an optimistic view of it, for sure.
So, okay. All right. So we've talked about what the heck are stimulants. And we've talked about a few different pathways of how some popular stimulants result in stimulation, but what is it that makes stimulants stimulating generally?
So just like in programming, in biomechanics, structure dictates function. So obviously, the reason that a squat works the way it does is partly because of the articulation with, the quad muscles and the hamstring muscles. So the structure of those very much dictates how much somebody's going to be able to lift. Well, that's true on a micro or nano scale with molecules. I think the easiest analogy to think of that's a real world example to a sport is like, think of your hand, like the structure of your hand and your fingers that project off the hand will fit very specifically into something. If you have like a crooked or a wonky finger, it's not going to fit into a standard glove. You might need a different glove or something like that. And that, I think that's a good analogy for how compounds fit or dock onto receptors. There is specificity of structure. So that's why, you know, if you eat carbohydrates, that they're not going to give you the same response as caffeine does. It's highly specific. And then when you play with some of those, they're called functional groups, those projections off the core structure of the molecule, you can change the activity. And that's basically what medicinal chemists do when they're trying to make a new drug. It doesn't apply to supplements because anytime you alter the core structure, now it's automatically a drug. But that's really what they're trying to do in trying to make safer or more potent drugs. Obviously, we now know, knowing the history of the pharmaceutical industry, it doesn't always work out that way. And what initially seems to be more safe and definitely more potent, sometimes we find out in the long run maybe wasn't so much so.
So first, I want everyone to be appreciative that I left a potential O.J. Simpson joke alone there with the glove analogy. But second,
you did.
that I then capitalized on by mentioning that I didn't do it. But my second comment is okay. If you alter an existing compound and then it therefore is no longer a supplement, is it just me, or do I feel like for the last couple decades a lot of what's been going on has been altering existing stimulants or hormones? If we're going to talk about kind of the second era of the pro-hormone craze, the pro-steroid quote unquote craze. So how is that even able to happen? I know that's a bit of a tangent from stimulants, but I think that would be
a very appropriate tangent.
Question.
Yeah, it is. So there's this perfect phrase used in this one paper that I'm going to give the title of because I'll mention it again later. They use the phrase botanical prospecting. So basically you find a more potent derivative, or you make one, and then you try to find somewhere in the plant, in nature, to find where it naturally occurs. And that's happened multiple times. Partly sometimes successfully, other times not. And I think the most familiar to people will be DMAA, where they said, oh, it's a component of geranium. No, it's not. That's fucking bullshit. It's not a component of geranium. Everybody knows that. And like whenever they look, or they do GCMS, or they basically analyze any of these plants that they say it's a part of. But what they do is they delay the process because they make somebody have to go do that study. Which allows them it buys them more time to sell a really profitable product and ingredient. So that's part of an answer. And then the other one is this whole research chemical thing that has really blown up since pro-hormones kind of went to the wayside or took a back seat. And now it's novel stimulants, where it shouldn't be in supplements. Sometimes they are found in supplements. More often they're sold as a research chemical because it's not currently marketed as a drug, so there's no regulation to specifically limit its use, but it's not a supplement by any stretch of the imagination. So all these research chemical companies pop up and they're selling SARMs, they're selling, things for hair loss that have been unmarketed. They're selling novel stimulants, like I said, like synthetic cathinones, which were bath salts. It's really interesting. Like as you get deeper in and you see, it's part of it. I admire the creativity, and the other part, I get angry at the deception. So it's like it's like hard to find a middle ground.
That's really interesting. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the botanical prospecting, it seems like, and the decision made seems like almost a direct consequence of the regulatory nature of the FDA, where it can be released, but then it has to be proven to be not a supplement before it's taken off. So people are basically saying, like they did with geranium and DMAA, they're saying, hey, this is found in nature. So we spend this time in a lab, we get some chemists in there, we've manipulated an existing stimulant until we find it has a unique property or stimulatory effect, and then we claim, sometimes without evidence, that it is in nature, and then someone else has to go do the legwork, which will take time, and in that time frame we can release it, say it's a supplement, make money, and then eventually we'll get shut down. But at that point, it's okay. We've cashed the check. Is that basically what happens?
Somewhat. I mean, I think, I'm not saying you're representing this position, but I think the average person's position is that it's like this catch-all, like dietary supplements are unregulated, so therefore they're just,
right.
They can't.
Some companies do this.
Yeah, they can't ever be useful or good or anything like that. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of truths in what you said, but the system on the pharmaceutical side is certainly not superior either. And they are the most well-funded institutions that, they are their own monopolies or conglomerates. So yes, they do need to be tested before they're released and go through clinical trials. That's definitely undeniably better than the supplement side where it's backward. But again, if we look at just remove whatever someone interprets as my opinion, and you look at the historical release of drugs, and then you find them being removed from the market or finding issues, that's an imperfect system as well.
Sure. Interesting. So how often would you say that this botanical prospecting is done with good faith, where it's like, hey, we're going to manipulate something, then we're going to try to find it, and we won't release the supplement until it is found, versus we'll release it once we have a reasonable argument that means we won't get jail time after the fact?
Yeah. I think it's definitely overwhelmingly not done in good faith. And yeah, people could say maybe I'm trying to paint myself or our companies in a better picture by saying that. But again, if you just look at the banned substance stuff or people testing positive for stuff that they didn't know was in there, again, there's objective facts that beyond my own perspective on that back it up. I do think it depends on the process that you go about it, because you can start by saying, let me find plant sources. Let me look through either textbooks or botanical, like a lot of this stuff came from I forget the term for it, like basically like ancient Chinese remedies, like thousands and thousands of years old, where that's actually where ephedra, the known effects of ephedra came from, because it was a tea. It was Ma Huang tea. And so, we knew how it felt before we could explain all of these things and then regulate it. So I do think there is a way to do it. It's definitely slower. And I think this is the second really important part of it, is it's harder to be competitive on a huge scale fast. So I think competition largely drives, I'm not removing the blame, but I do think to deny that factor would be short-sighted.
Eric,
for sure.
So this is going to sound now like a talking point for Elemental, but Ben, I think you could swing in and explain this perfectly now, because there are some things that we won't talk about, Ben, that let's just say are in the pipeline that kind of deal, when we talk about either botanical derivatives or just having a little bit of ingenuity to take a look at some of the sourcing, or I'll just say derivatives because we have a few different things in mind. But Ben, essentially in a supplement space that is more unregulated, I guess the question could be asked, what is potentially the benefit then of trying to not put some regulation, but do some of your own testing or third-party testing? Like what does that do in actuality, where we're talking about potential ingredients? Because now I think we can speak about this as an example with Utopia, what you did when you first brought some of these ingredients to the supplement space, and then what third-party testing actually does as you begin to add some of these new novel ingredients in terms of transparency, information for the average consumer, and then the overall function. So it's not just hey, we slapped this shit together, and I'm not going to name any other supplement company, but we understand it's like, okay, what we're really having here is not like a derivative of meth, but some, I'll just say like some pre-workouts or what have you, where there is some form of transparency information.
Oh, there's definitely derivatives of meth in pre-workouts. So that's not even an exaggeration.
I just never want to overstep the claim. So like, hey, you're there, say it. Yeah. But Ben, to your point then, where pharmaceutical, there's all the testing and things, supplement space, unregulated, you're trying to introduce some of these things. What then is the function of something like a third-party testing? Like, what does it do in actuality? And this sounds like a talking point for Elemental, but it's because we're about this life. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, but so it is, but it's also a talking point for anybody else who's doing things or attempting to do things more legitimately. Yeah. Like this. Like it or not, this is the eventual path that dietary supplements are going to have to take if they want legitimacy. or if they're going to survive pharmaceuticals. So to answer your question, it's a layer of external validation that's not mandated, but you're doing it optionally. And I think one of the things that academia has and clinical, like pharmaceutical companies have in clinical research, is that peer review and that external validation that that the dietary supplement industry needs more of. So it's whether you do it optionally and yeah, you pay out of pocket for it, or you wait until the FDA does it and then you look terrible. You've already hurt people. Like you've done so much damage. So it's basically self-regulating, but at the same time, ensuring that, just like you said, we're not just throwing something together and saying, oh my God, this is super exciting and novel. We can get it out. We could sell tons of it, because something I think people probably need to grasp better, because there's this, like, I guess, dichotomy between natural is good, synthetic is bad, or chemophobia, is that supplements, botanicals, if you go out and just take a walk or a hike in nature and you grab every plant you see and eat it, there is potential for catastrophic effects. I mean, the most, like, you can kill yourself. You can kill yourself. Like they're not totally safe. Like the most toxic thing that we know of is Botox. That is natural. But people are injecting it into their skin. Like, don't tell me that's not ironic. Like, people are actually putting Botox under their skin, injecting it. And that's the most toxic substance that is known. It's ironic.
Yeah. The naturalist fallacy is one that falls apart under scrutiny from many different angles. And I think it's like, I mean, it happens all the time in the bodybuilding community. You'll get this guy talking about eating clean who's taking experimental, drugs made for animals, to get huge. So I think our audience should be well familiar with that. But I think it's really interesting to me to find that there's all of these markets or potential, let's say, marketing avenues that come as a consequence of the regulations. So you have the pharmaceutical industry, which is more front-loaded with you have to test this and prove its safety and efficacy before we release it, which allows a lot of people to use the naturalistic fallacy to then promote borderline things that, like, we can't claim it diagnoses anything or fixes anything, but we're releasing these supplements that, some people will tell you to get for the same purposes of what exists in the pharmaceutical industry, but you can buy it, you don't have to get a prescription, etc. And then the supplement companies who overstep, push marketing heavier, or do some of the things you're talking about and hurt people, they create a secondary market for, quote unquote, like evidence-based supplement companies that do it right and provide a pathway for, let's say, drug tested athletes to have more faith in the things they buy, because they're doing it legitimately and they can have greater trust with the producer. So it's this kind of multi-layered cascade that I find very interesting. So I'm really glad to have you on to talk about it.
Well, I appreciate that you guys are interested in it, because I feel like, I think it is, of course, like, I'm biased. I think it is an interesting topic, but I do think there's interesting aspects of it that if people maybe it just needs more exposure, you know what I mean? For people to actually get engaged in it and understand. Like, I do think that is partly the solution to naivety or ignorance, is just understanding something a little bit better. And I've spent my life trying to do that. Like, I think it's, well, like you said, it's a rabbit hole, and it's a rabbit hole I haven't been able to get off, and I don't want to, because I learned so much that I didn't even think that I was going to in the beginning. Like, this started as a bodybuilding journey in a way to improve my own performance and all the other things, and now it's become something completely different. And I think it is really fascinating. I think the point, because I don't want to lose the core point of what you said, because it is such a good point, is I think the unfortunate part is that the consumer kind of loses out in that, because there's just 100%. Too much to analyze. It's too many things to try to be aware of, and too many intricacies. Like, there are all these little fine details. And I think we need more people talking about it, and definitely more people probably doing it in a better way than I can, which is distill it in less technical, really universally. I do my best, but I feel like there's people who are just naturally better at it than me. And I think the more, like, think of it as like pop sci teachers, like the YouTube channels. Like there's people who are amazing at taking really, really complicated theoretical things and like physics and just distilling it down to this really and the light bulb goes off. That's what gets you engaged in learning, is like, I get it. I thought I was too dumb to get that. Like we need teachers.
Well said. Well said. So getting back to things that are interesting, we want some light bulbs to explode on people. We mentioned that there is actual derivatives of meth in some pre-workouts. Let's talk about some of these heavy hitters in the stimulant game. So which stimulants are the most stimulating? Where do we get to derivatives of meth? And can you please send me a link after the show?
So unfortunately, you can't go in and buy any of the OTC stuff anymore and make your own. The FDA has caught wind of that with the pseudoephedrine. But the most potent ones, they are actually amphetamines. So in really the illegal categories, amphetamines really are the most potent, and that falls under this general classification of phenethylamines. So phenethylamine, if you break it apart, is phenyl, which just means it's got a hexagon ring in the structure. Ethyl just means it's a 2-carbon chain, and then amine means it has a nitrogen with some hydrogens on it. So typically anything that has those structural components is a stimulant. It has stimulant effects. And usually the more potent ones are, particularly meth is like the most potent illegal stimulant. And then there's gray area stuff that we've already talked about, which are amphetamine derivatives as well, DMAA, DMHA, which is the newer one. DMAA got banned, and then everybody's rushing, just like what happened with ephedra. Everybody's rushing to find the replacement, and then it's DMHA, which just means slightly different structure, but still looks similar. So it acts on similar receptors to cause its stimulation, but it just doesn't fall. It's a legal loophole, essentially. And then on the side that's most relevant to the conversation, yohimbine and rawalsine, which it's an isomer of yohimbine. But there's a major asterisk there in that a lot of supplement companies make this claim that it's cleaner. It doesn't cause as much of the anxiety or the jitteriness or any of that stuff. And it's more selective. But it's theoretical animal data to back that up. And I think the irony in making that claim is that they also say it's more potent, which it needs validation for that claim. I lost my train of thought for a second there. So if you remove the anxiety promoting effect, it's actually a contradictory statement, because that means you're removing part of the adrenaline releasing aspect of it, because that's why they call it fight or flight. Like you have a dual response when you release adrenaline. Some people, whatever personality type, whatever, some people run, some people fight, get prepared to fight. So that anxiety or anxiogenic aspect of yohimbine is directly related to it doing its mechanism. So I really don't buy that whole rawalsine thing yet, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I'd like to see some better data than I've seen people use to try to validate that.
So let's talk historically about some of the pre-workouts and stimulants that have actually been pulled off of the market, and why that was and what was in them, because that kind of ties together, like what are the ingredients that are most stimulating, with also like what makes stimulants most stimulating, and then what is actually banned or allowed and how that process goes. So talk us through the torrid history of the last decade of pre's, if you will.
So full disclosure, this is a paper that everybody should. It's 3 pages. I shared it on my Instagram story. I realized that maybe 5 people may have seen that. So I hope more than 5 people will see this. The paper is titled History Full Circle, Novel Sympathomimetics in Supplements. It's a review paper. It's really, really well done. That's where the botanical prospecting phrase comes from. And they actually detail the history of these amphetamine derivatives they were developed in the 30s. Actually as alternatives to amphetamine, because basically amphetamine blew up during World War II. And then long-term, they saw the abuse potential. They saw all the issues. These competing companies, not unlike the supplement industry, just tried to make more derivatives and compete. And they basically pursued all of these derivatives, these structural manipulations on amphetamine to find something safer. And they just they never got patented and they never got further pursued. And then 70, 80, 90, a century later, they're making their way into stimulants. Again, it's hard for me not to admire the creativity and the digging, the excavation work to find that stuff, but you can't deny that it's deceptive and it's kind of fucked up. So yeah, a lot of this stuff started to find replacements for amphetamine, and that's where DMAA came from. That was, I think, an expired patent for some type of lung function improving drug, and then same thing with DMHA. I don't know how that didn't get kind of covered in the regulation when DMAA got banned, but it didn't. And maybe just a lapse of mind on the, whatever the attorney was who was filing that paperwork. They said, oh, it's all cyclic structures. This one's not cyclic. And they just missed that part. And some chemists exploited, the hole in that. But they all started as amphetamine derivatives, and then they've now made their way into supplements. And same thing, like basically everything that whenever I say amphetamine, these all fall underneath the phenethylamine class. And that's why even stuff that's not amphetamine, like synephrine and synephrine derivatives, they're phenethylamines, and there's derivatives of those that have made their way into supplements as well.
Interesting. So is there some degree of whack-a-mole happening here, as far as like these derivatives from the 30s get brought up and then one gets banned or found out at a time, or sounds like there's been semi-successful efforts to like go, okay, we need to deal with this class of drug that has made its way into the supplement supply?
Yeah, well, I think the issue, and it will perpetually be an issue, is the lawmakers aren't chemists. Right. And not that the chemists are lawmakers, but I think, they can read the law and they know where there might be a gap in there. So yeah, I think it's fascinating. Like, I think I almost look at it similar to the whole idea of like hackers, and they use the term black hat hacker, gray hat, and white hat. I feel like there's gray hat, white hat, and black hat chemists too, where some are just looking to exploit that and they can't wait to do it because it can be so massively profitable. I think I missed something in your question though. So if I did, please remind me, because it was a good question, and I think there was another component that I wanted to touch on.
No, I think you got to it. I was basically just asking, has there been any effective ways of preventing the exploitation of the gaps? Like, you would think lawmakers would maybe consult chemists, but I know, like, for example, some of the anabolic steroid control related acts, instead of just listing compounds, that's actually not true. This is not a law. When I read some of the natural bodybuilding organizations banned substance lists, they've added some things where like anything that is, and then they name a class, and it's like, okay, that's smart, because there are going to be another versions of that. And it does seem like whatever has been done from 2004 and then the updated one in the last decade has really, like you said, put the pro-hormone / pro-steroid market kind of at least not been the focus lately. It seems less easy to exploit than stimulants have been.
Yeah, so I think just give me a second here.
Take all the time you need, buddy.
I don't want to be redundant on the point. I've seen the same thing with WADA. So just like you said, in natural bodybuilding federations, when they ban something, they usually say amphetamine ... and its derivatives. And my thought, and again, this is just speculation on my part, my thought is that either they find a way where it doesn't fit into that class, therefore it's a legal loophole. And I think the irony is like, yeah, I'm talking a lot about amphetamine and phenethylamines, but that doesn't mean that there can't be things that are not phenethylamines that are stimulating. And so, for example, like an addendum to that list of the most potent stimulants would be the Ritalin medication, which is methylphenidate. That's not a phenethylamine. It's technically a piperidine, it's totally different. It has a totally different structure, and it's very stimulatory. So I think it's interesting, like, it's so hard to patent or monopolize or legislate physiology. And I think that's the difficulty, is like there's so many ways of getting to an endpoint of producing a response. and it's super humbling.
You know, Omar, I think a good angle to take here is to think about, like, what's the issue with stimulants? Because I think a lot of us who are just maybe taking a pre-workout 3 or 4 times a week, at least personally, I've never gotten to the point where I'm like, man, I need that pre-workout, you know? So when people think about stimulants in the context of the supplement industry, they probably think very differently than when they think about stimulants in the context of amphetamines being sold illegally. Like, what is the issue here? Why does there need to be such scrutiny? And, you know, like you delineated between black, white, and gray hats, like there's obviously a right and wrong way to do this that puts the consumer at risk in a way that potentially doesn't. What's the issue?
Well, I think if we put everything under the umbrella of using the term drug to describe it, because supplements have drug action, like I kind of alluded to earlier, and they have potencies many times that rival or are equivalent to pharmaceuticals that are on the market, there are concerns. I mean, you can have an issue, especially if the behavioral patterning is moving in the direction of abuse, which is basically overusing something to the point where there's chronic dose escalation. You're using more and more to get the same effect. It's kind of dictating your life. It's changing your behaviors. It's changing your social dynamics. Like you're seeking drugs, the drug response above typical things that are important in life, like social interaction or, you know, work productivity or whatever else. Because I think you can make a very strong case. And yes, I'm partly influenced by the book that I'm finishing by Dr. Carl. I forget what his last name is. But the book is called Drug Use for Adults, and he's a pharmacologist, and so he's not just some random guy, you know, making these claims, but he's trying to make the case that it should be almost like it is in Brazil, where I think it's Brazil, where everything's kind of unscheduled, and they actually support people. They give them clean needles who are, you know, intravenous heroin and everything else users. I think the one thing that's inescapable is this whole drug. The way we treat drugs in America is not working from multiple levels. So I don't know. I think if I knew what the best answer was, I don't know if I'd be making supplements. I don't know. But anyway, the point to your question is these things can be dangerous. You can overuse stimulants. You can be over reliant on stimulant products, and especially if, you know, with the way the market exists, which is so many gray area or companies who are kind of trying to just, you know, hopscotch or whatever, one another for the stronger one. I mean, we all see the marketing terms like, this is the strongest shit, this will get you cranked or whatever else. If that's really the bar that you're trying to hit, you kind of have to use stuff that really flirts on that line.
Well, I was going to say, Eric, to Ben, as a formulator, the very interesting question would be what considerations go into formulating said supplements and choosing those stimulants, because just to be perfectly transparent and blunt, you could get, let's say in quotations, a black hat chemist. You could get someone, if we're using a Breaking Bad reference, a good old Saul Goodman, like someone from the legal side that would very easily be able to discern, okay, here's what we could do, here's what we can claim. And it would seem, Ben, it's almost like a race to the bottom dollar of how can I make the most stimulatory supplement. And so these things like amphetamines or DMAA derivatives or anything that you can do if you have someone who's well-versed, a chemist that can make these things, it's the race to be the most potent out there, because you want people to use something. And there's so many gym bros that I know. There's someone that I gave our Prime Pre that basically was using a DMAA pre-workout before. He's like, man, nothing hit like that. I'm like, yeah, man, because it's illegal. Like, what do you want me to say? But he's like, he's jonesing for it. And I think just the question I want from you, besides honestly the kind of a moral argument that you want to maybe be transparent with what you're including and what its actual function is would be the question of what are the considerations for a formulator when choosing some of these stimulants? Because I can see some of those tougher choices where, wait a second, we're trying to compete with everyone else. Wouldn't we want to make something that's the most stimulating? We kind of are by our, our marketing. We're being transparent by saying like, this shit is crazy. Like, once again, the legal defense argument where it's like, well, we told them that they're going to do these things. there's still that missing gap. I think there could be a strong, once again, legal argument that because the people using it don't potentially know the deleterious effects of some of these things, that there could be some of the onus and the responsibility. But as a formulator, how do you make those calls? Because for us, I know as an example, there are things that we could have used that would be more stimulating, but we decided not to, and just even in the language we use. But what are those considerations for yourself or just companies in general? Because it does seem there is a major financial incentive. That's kind of what I'm getting at, that if you want to compete against everyone else, you want to go fast? Well, I want to go faster, right?
Yeah, I think it's hard to not use general terms to answer that question. But I think the simplest way I could say it is using things that have withstood the test of time, whether that is botanical things that we know from naturopathic healing things. Like I'm not opposed to finding leads anywhere. Like I'll look on forums, I'll look in encyclopedias of herbal things, of psychoactive compounds and stuff like that. So I think it is sort of a confined space to operate in the space that we are dealing, and not be going into that kind of more gray area space. I think whether it's weird or what it is, that challenge excites me. But it's really looking for stuff that, again, has withstood the test of time, and it's not new and unused in any really populations, or was, but in like can only be proven in maybe animal studies. And just finding creative ways to kind of work around within the confines of that, which is combinations of things. Like I think the blunt reality of formulating is most of us who are formulating products have the same tools at our disposal. I think what makes one formula different than the other is how you choose to use those. And if you can find some type of unique combination that hasn't been utilized or has been underutilized, like I've talked about in the past on an Iron Culture about, the utility of 5-HTP for fat loss products. There was nobody doing that. And now I know there's 2 companies who do it, but it's still relatively unused. And there's randomized controlled trials, like in a lot higher sample sizes than most other fat loss ingredients. So I think I think there are still places that can be exploited, but in a safer way. But it's slower. It takes a little more time and work. And but I don't believe that it's useless. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that's kind of my take on it.
I'm glad you brought up combinations of things, because I can think this goes way back, but it's gotten far more complex, and it also does change based on what gets regulated and why something gets regulated. So for example, back in the day, the combination stack was the Federal Caffeine stack, right?
ECA,
EC stack. Yeah, oh yeah, and aspirin, or sometimes ECY, which was seen as less safe.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about some of these compounds is, so some of them are seen as, okay, this has addictive potential, which, like you talked about, could have a negative effect on behavior and have long-term cumulative consequences. But it does seem like some stimulants have been banned because they can be potentially acutely dangerous in certain consequences. That was at least the perception of ephedra. We had a track star had a heart attack, and we went up. It was ephedra. So could you maybe delineate the differences between like safety and addictive potential? Is that something worth talking about a bit with stimulants?
Yeah, I think it's a tough area to tackle because, again, I need to carefully choose my words here, but I think a lot of times we tend to plant the blame onto a compound, which just exists. Like when they're doing an autopsy or something, of course they're trying to find a reason. And if you find even an inactive amount of a compound, you can blame that as the cause of death. So 100%. That can be very, very misleading. And that's a problem. Now, I'm not saying that some of these things, they deserve respect. Is really like, it's the same thing of going into your aspirin container and saying, oh, it's OTC, I'm just going to take the whole bottle. Like, do we need to regulate us or nature? Like, I don't know. I don't know. And I am throwing up my hands and saying, I don't know. But I think there's imperfections still in this. And I think the other important thing to grasp within the question you asked is that toxicity is dose dependent. So the difference between a medicine and a toxin is purely the dose. It's purely related to the dose. So like I said, you can inject Botox and it won't kill you and it will have a clinical effect and do the thing that you want it to do. But if you use too high of a dose, it will kill you. It will literally, you'll have respiratory depression and you'll die. And this is true of any compound. So there is sort of a neutrality to the compound. It's just existing. It's sort of how we're interfacing with it, and disrespecting it or combining things. Like I think oftentimes, and we know this in like the bodybuilding kind of subcultures, is oftentimes there's a lot of combinations of things. Like you'll go out, you'll party hard, you might be on anabolics, on aromatase inhibitors, on GH or something. You got polypharmacy now. Like there's an element of unpredictability about that, and that's true of combining. Like I know people combine pre-workouts with recreational drugs, and that's why we specifically say don't do it on the labels. But you still know people are doing it, and it's weird. There's these trends now. I think this has been totally misrepresented, and I don't mean to kind of get out there, but it is relevant right now, of like the whole dry scooping thing and everybody making a big deal about it. But there is one element of truth to that, is you are taking a bolus concentrated dose. So the difference between maybe taking 10 minutes to sip something at its full potency and sort of get more of a trickling into your bloodstream versus taking the full thing, having your stomach and digestive tract having to dilute it and then having it hit all at once. That's like, it's like giving someone an infusion versus a bolus injection of whatever drug they might give you IV in the hospital. It's totally different. At some point, you will have an over response initially until you level back out, and it's definitely slower through the oral route, but you still have the same concept. Is you'll get a much bigger peak of the curve.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense, and I think you made a really good point about it. At a certain point when we're having this conversation, you do have to decide whether what we need to be regulating is our behavior or the compound. But at the same time, there are some compounds that are objectively more risky than others. Like, like for example, caffeine, the effective dose at like 3 milligrams per kilogram that you can get for performance or stimulatory effects that might be relevant to lifters, maybe a little higher if you want to be more consistent, is far below a lethal dose, right?
Yeah.
But there are other compounds where those two numbers are a little closer together. Like, for example, and I could be wrong on this, but my understanding of like yohimbine is that when you start to get into the effective dosages, you also start to step real close to where you might get some side effects that you wouldn't want. Yeah. Is that an accurate representation of some stimulants?
Very. So there's a term for that in pharmacology, which is the therapeutic index, which basically means that gap between the effective dose, so the dose that produces the response, and then the dose where you start to see signs of toxicity. And the difference between those two areas is the therapeutic window. So ideally, with an ideal drug candidate, you want a large therapeutic window. So really what that touches on is something we talked about a little bit before, is what ingredients are most stimulating. Really what you're asking is what is most potent. And you're 100% true. Yohimbine is dramatically more potent than caffeine is. So yeah, it does require more knowledge, more responsibility, and there is more inherent danger to it. So you do kind of have to know what you're doing. And I think that comes with responsible formulating. I think that also comes with responsible validation. So making sure if you're saying you put 5 or 10 milligrams in your product, that there's actually that in it and not 50, because that's where you can run into issues too. And then responsible use. Again, like I can't get on the soapbox about this enough. We specifically tell you how to use a product for a reason. We don't recommend dry scooping. It's not just because it affects the flavor profile. Like, for example, like in Prime Pre, if someone dry scoops a double scoop of that's a ton of electrolytes. Like, think of if you sat down and you had your whole plate in front of you and you just dumped the plate into you like they do in the cartoons. Like, what's the probability of doing that versus slowly eating it that you will have gastric distress? It's dramatically higher in the bolus dose. It's no different. Just because this is a concentrated scoop doesn't mean it's any different.
Eric, you know what this conversation's reminded me of, and Ben, we've had this in several different permutations on Iron Culture, but that is the whole idea of informed consent, where I think that is something kind of missing in the industry, where we talk about either the asymmetry between, the manufacturers, the formulators, and then the consumers, where there's also the hyperbole of the marketing, right? Which I could say is basically almost a form of propaganda, where it's not correctly informing the consumer of the intended use, what you really should be doing. And sometimes because, the marketing eclipses our emotional ability to regulate our choices, where it's like, well, this is dangerous, don't you want this? So it's like the marketing just leapfrogs over the conversation of transparency, the idea of conformed consent, or all those other things. And so almost, Ben, that's why I remarked to Ben, like we joke about this, like internally with Elemental, is that it's like, yeah, man, evidence-based, appropriate dosing, and the idea of using appropriately. But it's like, that's not sexy. You're like, when you use that as a marketing term, or even in our conversations, right? We're like, Ben and myself, when people ask us on the lives about using dosages, this and that, we'll always start low, work your way up. Things that basically don't sound appealing, right? Someone's like, man, I want to have the best workout of my life. I'm like, cool. So prime pre, yeah. Start with half of a full dose. One scoop is like, okay, but I want to feel like my face is melting off. It's like, okay, like let's walk it back. So it's this, you're against these giants in a way of, this is what they've been told, this is what it be used for. Let's minimize kind of the potential side effects. And even when we talk about the idea of yohimbine, right? As being one of the things, that's kind of why third-party testing for purity and potency is like, if you get these ranges off, if you're wrong, man, those deleterious effects. Yeah. So, but just the idea, I do think that's why having these conversations, the idea of, in general, like not the speak too grandiose, like an open society, so we could talk about these things and people can make up their mind, like informed consent becomes very important, where you're trying to get over some of that marketing. It's just interesting.
Yeah, I think I just reiterate my point is there needs to be more conversations about it, for sure. For sure. It just needs to get out there more.
That's well said. So let's talk about, so it sounds like, if you're a savvy formulator, like we know you are, it's the intelligent combinations of potential, white hat compounds, we'll say that, in a unique way with the right instructions, so that people take it and get the desired effects and get the best of both worlds in terms of both safety and potency. Let's talk about the combinations that have existed over time. So why were people stacking ephedrine, caffeine, or an aspirin and yohimbine? What's up with the ECA, ECY stack back in the day? And that seems very different than what has been combined in pre-workouts and fat burners of the last 10 years.
Yeah, I still don't understand the aspirin component of that. But typically what you're going for, just like if you get a medication, let's say you have some type of surgery and they give you a painkiller, there's a reason that they will use maybe like Tylenol with some type of derivative, some morphine or opioid derivative. Usually that's actually to have you use less of the dose of the opioid, but the point still stands, which is some type of synergistic effect between the two ingredients. And you can have synergy in different aspects. So again, we talked about this in the caffeine episode, where one branch of pharmacology deals with pharmacokinetics, which is basically what the body does to the drug. So that's absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion. So let's just say a really popular one is taking piperine with curcumin, or turmeric. So that actually does have some data behind it, where turmeric is very, very lipophilic. It's very low bioavailability, meaning it doesn't get extracted from the gut into systemic circulation very well. And if you combine it with piperine, you get a lot more in the blood. So that is synergy. That's pharmacokinetic synergy. It actually increases the amount that gets absorbed. So that's one aspect of synergy. Another one is pharmacodynamic, and that's basically what the drug does to the body. So that's basically, we're usually talking about receptor interactions, and there's multiple versions of that. One could be maybe you have, let's just use the cholinergic example, where there's sub branches of the choline receptor, and maybe compound A docks at one active site, and then compound B docks at the second active site. You can actually produce a greater response with lower dosages of each. So the appeal of that is maybe you'll get the same or a heightened response from lower doses of each, which means you're better within the therapeutic window. So there's that aspect of synergy. And then the one thing you touched on, which is seeing some new ingredients come in that have departed from the EC or the ECY stack, which is cholinergics. That's really like a whole new branch. And again, full disclosure, I could just not be aware of them. But at the time when I first formulated Yohimbine, I didn't see this happening, where it was stacking a cholinergic ingredient with an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. So that would be pharmacodynamic as well. So you increase something that will produce more acetylcholine, and then you approach the degradation pathway. You block the degradation, so you'll get a much better response from that cholinergic ingredient. So again, like, pharmacology is humbling, physiology is humbling, and I think to say that there's only one way to approach this problem, I don't know if that's the right word, I think would be very, very short-sighted. So, and I think to say, oh, we just have to use amphetamine derivatives, there's just no way around it. Like, I think that's lazy.
And I guess that's why we see different formulations out there on pre's, where one might just have caffeine and another might have a bunch of stuff that the consumer doesn't even actually know what it is, and caffeine. So yeah, like let's talk brass tacks. Rubber hits the road. Another metaphor for something that really comes down to what we care about, which is getting yacked and stronger. If I'm going to take a pre-workout, is there a potential benefit to me getting into the weeds on this, or should I just be taking caffeine?
I don't think there's any shortcoming of just taking caffeine. Like, if you want to be a minimalist or reductionist, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you can absolutely get a response from caffeine within that window, 400 to 600. That's the reasonable exercise performance, and even below that. And I think people really should be aiming for the least they need to produce the desired effect. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I would say, like, do you enjoy music where someone just plays a guitar, or do you enjoy a full band? Like, there are dimensions beyond just having the caffeine. That I'm not saying maybe they'll get you stronger, or maybe they might not produce any type of chronic adaptation, but they will produce a different acute response. And I don't think that should just be ignored because it doesn't make your muscle bigger. I do think there's something to that. And I think a lot of people say, oh, all pre-workouts feel the same. I think that's bullshit. I think that's a cop-out. I just think that means you haven't just used enough products. But does everybody have to? No. Like, is there this necessity to get the maximal effects? No. But we know just on human behavior, like, that's like saying everybody should just use alcohol. It's the only drug that people should use to let loose. No. There's a reason people use other drugs, because they produce different effects, and they give certain personalities or whatever else, the desired effect.
Eric.
Absolutely.
I want to give you a little insight into some of our data that we have in terms of sales, because I think that would be informative in terms of not only formulations, but people using particular things, or why people are even attracted to pre-workouts in the first place. Because I do think a lot of it, to Ben's point, comes down to personal preference. And because you're ingesting something, you have your own subjective experience of what's going on, like your perception of things, and then how you respond to that, how you feel about it, and what you're really looking for. Where I would say, like, jokingly, Eric, you helped me with my previous company in terms of formulations, where we stuck to the fundamentals. We had basically just caffeine. And then when myself and Ben got together and we were talking formulations, we wanted to have that avenue for people that just wanted, once again, something that had caffeine. So using the analogy of Ben, like someone that just wants to listen to guitar versus a full band, something that they know has been proven to be effective. They know the response that they're going to receive from it, and they like that response. Like, that is response appropriate for their intended function, which is training at a certain intensity. Cool, whatever. And then we would have, once again, the whole idea behind the Prime Pre that has other stimulants would be the concept if someone wanted more, right? So if someone, and that's what we called it, the Prime line, the idea of elite athletes. So now we're dealing with people that want every stone overturned, where their experience, they want maybe a little bit more what they're feeling. So a feeling of euphoria, a feeling of being on without then the degradation, what Ben's talking about. Cool, whatever. So like different avenues and this and that. But I brought up sales and data because from my side, I came from a very low dose use or advocating basically being a supplement minimalist. I had the data also from my previous company that there could be a space for that. And then Ben and myself launched together. And even, trying to have that transparency, the ability for everyone to navigate kind of the website and see these are the different options. What do you want? Then what ended up happening? What else sold what? Like what was the what sold the best out of like our less stimulating to more stimulating? What ended up happening?
Yeah, it's 100% the prime products. It's the higher stims, and yeah, I think we have, at least you could say maybe there's some bias in our observation of it, but it certainly seems like it backs up everything that we've been talking about, is that those dimensions. I'm not saying that some people only want the minimalist, but it seems like the overwhelming majority want more color, want the full band.
And Eric, that's the thing I was going to bring up, is that it seems like, not superficially, but people say like, yeah, man, I just want to use that caffeine. Like, I get it. Like, I just want to train. I want to get a good pump or whatnot. And then they go to the website. And again, there's nothing, I like to feel that how we present the information, that there's nothing hyperbolic or leads you a certain way. In fact, full disclosure, this is why I say this, we make a better margin off of our base pre. So the one that has just caffeine, like straight up, Eric. We won't go into the details, but we make more money. If this was a pure financial incentive, we would really want to promote the base pre. Our margins are considerably higher on that one. So like I just want to disclose that, because it seems like, we could be saying, oh, we're trying to promote all equally. It's like, yeah, man, but you have a vested interest in like prime pre. It's like, actually, bottom dollar wise, base pre with just caffeine would benefit us better, bottom dollar. But people get to that.
I personally take the base, the prime, and Utopia before each workout, dry scooped.
Yeah.
So I just think
you got to try the. Well, see, that's being Ben the formulator and being an owner, and then you, Eric, being on the scientific advisory board. Like, I personally like the base pre. Like, and I'm not just saying that because of our margin.
I like it too.
I use it on a regular basis, and I use prime pre. But people, the point that I'm trying to say is that people reach the window of choice. So now we tell them these things, and what do they actually check out with, Eric? After being informed and all these things, and what they say they likely would want, where base pre had a lot of people seemingly interested, and then what do people buy? The thing that's more stimulating. So it's just interesting. It's just an interesting aside to this conversation, that not only are we talking about the theoreticals, but like in actuality, then what is human behavior like when presented with some of these options in a very narrow confine, which is our own supplement company.
So let's talk about, why is prime more stimulating? Because it's not just more caffeine.
Right. Yeah. So really everything that we touched on in those different stimulatory neurotransmitters, it's hitting more colors in the spectrum. So you have the cholinergic pathway that you're working on with alpha GPC, which is a choline prodrug. Yeah, I use the term drug, but it's just a catch-all term. It just means it gets converted. When it's metabolized, it gets converted to acetylcholine. It has huperzine A, which again, like I said, is an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, so it prevents the breakdown of that. Those aren't in the baseline. It does have 100 more caffeine. It has the citrulline, which really isn't going to lead to more stimulation. So really, it's the cholinergics plus the higher caffeine, and then all the things, the core formula, which is also in base, all kind of working together. So if I didn't apply all of the stuff that we talked about with synergy, I think I would just be a talking head.
Totally understood. So I think that's perfect. I'm glad that we actually can use stuff you've formulated to give an example of how you can take a synergistic approach to try to get something, and also including that therapeutic index, so that you aren't just having to go, sweet, let's just make it more caffeine per dose.
Dump it in. Yeah, which is something that we're seeing, which is like 100%. I don't know. I wonder in 5 years if the common dose in like an RTD that you get in a convenience store is now going to be 500, because we've seen that escalation happen before. Like Red Bull was 160, and now the average that you do find next to it in the convenience store is almost double that. It's 300. So
yeah, and I think it's tough, because acutely sometimes you'll see it go up and then down, but I think the overall trend line is positive.
I don't know if we're going back.
Yeah, unfortunately. And it also seems to coincide with society also demanding greater workloads for less pay and things like that, So yeah, there's actually a coffee like RTD drink that is marketed here in New Zealand, and it is from a Japanese country, and the marketing line is how Japan gets it done. Like,
oh my.
Right, so it's like the idea of the stereotypical highly productive society, and it's like, here's how the whole society does it: is we take greater amounts of stimulants.
So you know what's crazy, and I think it's really cool that you brought that up, because the history of all of these, let's remove the past 100 years where, when there wasn't really pharmaceutical companies existing, is culturally that's how we use these things. Like manual labor jobs in many of these countries still use, like I said, like cut, they use it for manual labor jobs. Like people use it just to get through their day, like tobacco leaf and stuff like that. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like I do think a lot of our interface with these psychoactive compounds can be very, very healthy and good and normal. I do think there's a difference when you take that higher purity route, because a lot of these people are chewing the leaf. Like even the coca leaf, you're not yielding that much cocaine when you chew the leaf. When you're making pure powdered cocaine, that's a different story. Again, talking about potency and dose, and maybe there's other compounds in the leaf that even things out. I don't know. It's very possible, but I do think sometimes the mirror gets turned on us, and we need to regulate our relationship with these things a little bit better, because this isn't something new. Like we've been doing this for thousands of years. We've been using plants to alter our lives and our productivity and our quality of lives.
Eric, I was going to say that's super interesting is that now in the modern context, we're joking, but you said about Japan, how it's marketed in New Zealand. What the first light bulb that went off for me is it's fascinating. Oceania, like just the proximity then to Japan of New Zealand versus being here like in Canada or in America, just how that is a thing where that's like the cultural potential association with like, oh, they're hard workers. Like forget matcha green tea, they drink caffeine. But also just if we talk of the history when it comes to tradition or in cultures that use some of these things. So a lot of people now, they listen to Joe Rogan or whatnot, and they talk about, oh, ayahuasca. I'm like, well, wait a second here. It's like, how they regulated it? Essentially by religion, right? Where it's then a tradition, there's a form and function, right? So you need basically the chief, a particular time and instance for you to use this. There's almost like a natural regulation that then occurs. So there's a spiritual component that makes it kind of sanctified. And therefore, if you're a part of the society, you use it at a particular time. So that's like kind of a neat way of regulating the use without, law, like codified laws or any of those things over here where it's like, wait a second, you guys can't use it. And then you have the people that listen to like that podcast and they hear, oh, like, man, somewhere in the jungle, they're using this shit and it was just making them trip balls and we got to do that. And you remove all the fixings that basically, controlled it in a way that was very interesting because it evolved with the society, right? And the traditions and everything else. And then you got people just using it. I'm not even going to name the company, but I told Eric, I told you where I visited, but let's just some of the people that are very pro experimenting with some of these things, but without the necessary back history of how it was used. And it just, goes right off the edge, man.
So I want to change my title at the company to Elemental Shaman after that conversation.
Yeah. In charge of human optimization.
Yeah.
Hey, what's your degree for that? I don't have one in that, bro. But
I'm a shaman. Sorry, don't worry about it.
So we've covered a lot of areas here, Ben. We've bounced around, and I think we've hit on a lot of really interesting topics. And I hope that we provided a lot of insights to the listener. Being the resident dual degree expert in this area, what do you think we still have yet to cover, and what do we need to touch on, if anything, remaining?
I think the only real thing is just mentioning about people's things that might alter people's experiences before they blame it on the product itself, or before they actually try to dose escalate. Like maybe since we've talked so much about self-regulation, I think to not touch on that a little bit more would actually, I don't know, it would be a disservice. So
yeah, we asked them to self-regulate. How do you do it? See you next time on Iron Culture.
Buy our book.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Ebook coming out next month. But so there's lifestyle factors that you can't control that do have a direct effect on the type of stimulation that you'll feel from the same dose. So that's true of caffeine. That's true of many other psychoactive compounds beyond caffeine. So obviously that's sleep. We've talked about sleep on the caffeine episode. If you're not sleeping enough and you're trying to make up for sleep deprivation by higher dosing of stimulants, it's not going to work out. Like Cliff Notes, it's not a good path to go on, and it's not sustainable. I think an interesting one is actually nutrition. That it's funny because coming from the nutrition background, there's really this sort of gap in talking much about sort of nutritional pharmacology, where neurotransmitters are made from amino acid precursors. So now most people in fitness and bodybuilding communities are probably not going to be protein deficient. But if you are on a dramatically restricted caloric diet and maybe your protein is lower, that could affect your ability to produce neurotransmitters, especially like tyrosine, phenylalanine. You need those to make a lot of these neurotransmitters. Environment. So a really interesting one is you actually need sunlight to produce your own serotonin. And that's actually what helps you make melatonin. So even regulation of sleep schedule can happen if you just don't get a lot of sunlight. I'm guilty of that myself. I have more insomnia if I don't go out in the sun. And I think people have realized it as well. Like if you spent an adequate amount of sun out in the sun in a day, you'll feel kind of more exhausted at night when the sun goes down. There is reason for that. Serotonin is converted to melatonin. So you're getting your own dosage, your endogenous dosage of melatonin by getting some sunlight. So that's very important because obviously serotonin is super important for mood and all these things. If you smoke, I don't know how many people do in the fitness community or not, but smoking does alter quite a few things, especially regulating processing enzymes like metabolic enzymes that degrade certain chemicals. So for example, again, we talked about this on the caffeine episode. If people smoke, they will actually tend to be higher metabolizers of caffeine. So there's these enzymes in your liver that are called CYP enzymes, 1A2, all different subtypes that metabolize specific drugs. And usually those will go up when you smoke. And then physical activity, that's a pretty obvious one.
Real quick, Ben, is that also true if someone takes caffeinated, nicotine gum?
Wait, what part true?
That you will have upregulated response to caffeine?
It shouldn't be. So actually it's, I don't know if you remember, we talked about the kind of word, the word soup of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. So whenever you ignite the cigarette, you will produce those. And I think it's probably directly related to those, not the nicotine itself. Because when you grill meat, you actually will upregulate CYP1A2 as well. Or induce it, which means you'll produce more of that enzyme. So no, the gum is better on many avenues of getting a dose of nicotine versus the cigarette. Then there's genetic factors which are less controllable, but things like everybody will have different natural production of those enzymes. So CYP1A2, again, we talked about this in the caffeine episode. Some people are slow metabolizers, some people are fast. That's largely just genetic based. And then lifestyle factors, which are partly controllable, which might upregulate or inhibit your response, especially things like other supplements. If you're taking like St. John's wort, that is kind of notorious for upregulating CYP3A4, and that metabolizes a lot of drugs. So yeah, I think that's really the last point is don't neglect or try to make up for a lot of things that probably need more attention than taking more supplement to try to fill that void.
Nutrition, physical activity, getting outdoors, and not that it's easy to know your genetic makeup. You have to sell a company your literal code of your physiology, but
yeah. Yep.
But at least you get to know whether you had ancestors in certain parts of the UK, which now I know I do. Hey, right? And I know that my urine will smell like asparagus if I eat it. So.
Yeah.
Worth it.
Oh, hey, you know what's crazy? I'm likely to bald by my genetic test. I never would have known that otherwise.
100%, bro.
Oh, man.
So yeah, I think Ben, that was a masterclass on stimulants. We greatly appreciate it. Omar, I'm going to kick it over to you. I've been kind of riding front seat here on this one, but obviously there might be some things I've missed.
No, Eric, as always, man, you knock it out of the park. And not just because you're my partner here. I got several partners in crime, different functions. Structure dictates function here, okay? Let's just all calm down. We can all be in love with each other. But to be serious, what I always find hilarious when we have Ben on, and I think we should have Ben on more, is Ben will ask me, we'll have just these conversations, like we're talking business, this and that. And then I'll say, like, yeah, man, we should talk about this for, like, you know, our Instagram or for, like, our IG Live, or this should just be something that we talk about. He's like, yeah, I just don't know if people would find it interesting. And inevitably, whenever we talk about it, there's so much to unravel that, once again, there's layers to knowledge, right? And I think when it comes to supplements, we're very much kind of, I mean, at best, when we talk about a nutrition, like, yeah, macros, bro. Protein, good. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the idea, like, just talking about caffeine, where there's all this interplay, the complexity, considerations that one must have that you think you know. And I think one of the best things that we do at Iron Culture, I like to think at least, is that you think you know something, and then Eric brings on the expert's expert to talk about it, or Eric just does like a deep dive where we spoke about cardio that reframes things. I think one of the best things of having a Ben on, I think personally, and this is selfishly, is being someone who produces content and you know, sees then the response of the viewer and the listener, is that it sets off those light bulbs where it's like, oh, I thought I knew that. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where you think, like, wait a second here, I'm ready to talk about, I have no idea what's going on, you know? And I love that. I do love providing that. And also the resources too, which is cool, where I was one of the 5, Ben, that swiped up on when you shared that article to review, like one of the 5, that was me. We'll include that link in the description, because what's cool, I like to take pride in that, the Iron Culture listeners, where they are inquisitive, right? Where they will follow those threads. And I'm now circling back, because we said this in the intro, Eric, that Ben will answer, like the caffeine episode, people's questions, right, on the YouTube, if they want further clarifications. Because I think this is something, once again, very easily that you might want to listen to it a second or third time to fully absorb it. And I find it, last thing, it's cute on Ben's part, where he's like, yeah, I don't have to cover that because, you know, we spoke about it on caffeine. I'm like, dog, this is a #1 content generation tip. People are going to need to be reminded. I've made the same squat video 50 times. Only 5 people have noticed. But it also, like, sometimes to review, because, you know, they listen and consume so much content that it never hurts to review it again. And Ben's saying, like, well, I spoke about it once. I mean, we did it. Where's Eric, for you? How many times have you covered the pyramids? Like, just give me lowball me the estimate of how many times you've probably been on a podcast with something related to the pyramids in the last 6 years. Like, dead serious. Is it more than 50? Is it more than 100? That's my question.
More than 100.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
See, Eric knows the game, Ben. You got to know this game, bro.
Wow.
It doesn't mean I necessarily like the game.
No,
I was just gonna say I admire that. I think I would be over fatigued by the game. The one thing we didn't touch on, I'd have adrenal fatigue from the game.
Yes. So let's talk about. No, I'm just kidding. Well, thank you so much, Ben. We greatly appreciate your expertise, your time, your thoughts, and I think you do a fantastic job of, even if we can't necessarily get into every layer of the onion on the podcast, people might have looked at it and been like, it's an apple. And now they're like, oh shit, that bitch is an onion. And I probably shouldn't bite it. And if I do, I'm going to see a lot of those layers, and it's not going to taste the way I expected. So I really appreciate that. So I just want to say thank you.
I appreciate it as well. I mean, I think the fact that to have the platform, I appreciate you guys having me on, being interested, asking really good questions, really good conversation. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on again. And anytime we want to hear Ben ramble about rabbit holes that he's getting into. Plus, I love the challenge of, as I'm thinking through it, what did I, like if I have to stop myself that I didn't know something, I need to go dig more too. So it helps me get better. So thank you guys.
Hey, Ben, where can people find you?
On my private Instagram now.
This was
at Ben Esgro.
So
elemental form.
Thank you.
Elemental formulations. Elemental.fit.
This was the opportunity, Ben, to promote.
He doesn't have a marketing degree, almost.
This is why I'm here. I'm like,
not at all. Not at all.
Well, I mean, if you could find me on my
shout out our company, Ben. Do it now.
No, I'm just joking. No, we'll make sure. So the article that you spoke about, we'll link that, your personal as well as Elemental. And anyone that has any questions, you go ahead and leave comments, and Ben will do his best to respond. We appreciate everyone listening. Yeah, it just so happens that Ben, once again, was in a country that doesn't extradite to the U.S. It just so happens that, Eric, who is he's our Golden Glove man, just happens to be in New Zealand, right? He left America for some reason, right? And we're all just floating somewhere there. That's just happenstance. So we appreciate you listening. You could go ahead and leave a rating and review on iTunes. If it's less than 5 stars, I'm going to be honest, it's not worth your time. I'm just going to give you that kind suggestion. And we will see you every single episode that happens on Mondays. Until next time.